All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Speak Up Sal. We're on 16, double checked. And today we're going to be talking about finding balance in your everyday life. So I kind of want to start a little bit talking about how living a life in balance can cause you a lot of stress, like speaking personally, right? So I notice when I give 110% to multiple things, I will 110% crash and burn for a couple days. So as opposed to going all out and then all out recovery, all out recovery, trying to find a middle ground, finding balance where I can do all the things I love to do and still have the energy that I have every day. So firstly, we can talk about this card a little bit. 11, Justice in the Light Sears, tarot deck. And you kind of want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So let's say here, maybe you can hold it.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So you see the kind of Libran scales, right? And the scales tend to represent that kind of weighing, that natural balance.
It's a symbol for balance for you.
Yeah, and we do that both for weights, right? That's our symbol for law, for the balancing the scales is symbolic of our judicial system and our law system, but it can also apply to, like Sal was saying, finding balance in your life, that masculine adventure, ambition, go get it done, to be balanced with the feminine of self-care and allowing and nurturing. So I see the path for her balance to be there's the daily balance, and then there's your monthly balance in your year. Sometimes there's periods in my life that are just naturally a little bit more aggressive and ambitious, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then there's periods that are whatever, a little bit more naturally open or spacious. And then also we want to be in tune with these greater rhythms and these greater flows, which would be the seasons and the planets and the cycles of our birth chart. And so, that spring energy has more of this okay, let's get out there, let's get going. That's summer energy, right? There's actually more energy present there for us to do more because we're feeding off the light, we're feeding off the sun. And in the wintertime, we don't have as much of that sun energy. That is the time to go dormant. That's the time to go in. That's the time to do less, and to maybe it's a time for self-care. It's a time for contemplation, right? And in those spaces where we pause and reflect, things can heal, things can grow, things can level up. And then when we come back to them again, there's this natural growth within that. So sometimes if we're too incessant, I got to do it, we don't leave space for that natural growth process that happens when we kind of pull back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like how you're talking about the waves, and it's a process, right? So for me, the way I guess I've been going at it is it's very linear. Okay, here's the finish line. I'm going to dart towards it.
Yeah.
When in reality, I'm darting towards it, and I crash, and I go back up, and I crash. When in reality, it's this wave you were talking about. Sometimes it goes up and it's doing well, and sometimes you're going to take some time to rest.
I think we want that. We want the fluid wave, but it can be more of this linear, or more of this
Stock market type.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I had something and I lost it. Yeah, I think it's good to keep talking about that linear. What does it look like to be linear, right? So when we get to, in some other episodes, we talked about fixed things. When we get too caught in the destination, I'm trying to get here, right? And then we make a point to that. That is that linear. Where if we're focused on the process, if we're focused on patterns, right? That's where you get into noticing the wave, or noticing the fallout.
Yeah.
And like you said, especially in these creative processes, sometimes I feel at least for me, there have been these almost manic periods where it's you get this idea and something wants to move through you, and you're up at night writing and channeling. And then you are tired sometimes, or there is a crash. And some people like that. Some people get off on that. I know programmers that are hey, I get 5 Red Bulls and I get 3 packs of cigarettes, and I just go at it for for like just 48 or 72 hours and they fucking love it. Right. And cool. Like as long as it's intentional, right? As long as you're like, hey, I'm going to go manic. I'm going to be crazy and I'll love it. And then I'm probably going to crash. And that's what I do. But if you're like, hey, like, why do I keep crashing? Like, what's going on? Like, so it's just about awareness.
Yeah, definitely about being aware of how much energy you have, but what you are capable of doing.
And I think like, there's this Taoist notion of Wu Wei. It's like effortless action, and I'm always like coming back to like trying to understand that better, embody that better. So it's this idea that like we do nothing and everything gets done. And I'm like, like if I don't do it, like it ain't happening. Like no one else is doing the dishes. But there have been moments like, I was trying to clean up my yard. Like we moved into this place, got 5 acres, and had all these dead trees. And this guy came in and cut the trees down for me. And he was supposed to clean up the trees. And then he kind of ghosted me on the cleanup. And
that's the worst part.
Oh yeah.
So I don't want to do that.
Oh
yeah.
So I'm like, dude, like, all right, I got to find it. Like, and then my guides kept being like, dude, just chill. Like, Wu Wei. It'll. So I let a couple weeks go by, and then my neighbor comes by, and he's like, hey, like, are you going to do anything with those trees? Cause like my son-in-law has a mill and I would use them for fence posts. And I'm like, they're yours, like, and I'm like, that's it. That's the Wu Wei, right? Like that's like
that's awesome. That's a great story about it.
So like the more we trust, the more, and that doesn't like that's not an excuse for lethargy or idleness or to not do anything, right? Like so knowing what yours to do, and then like giving enough space for the universe to help you, to present resources, to, and that. For me, that's been like that like balance of masculine and feminine is like the key to like a healthy process for me.
It's awesome.
Which I'm still like ongoing. Yeah. So I know for me, like when I'm like very clear on what the next step is, like I rarely get clear images of where it's going to be as a finished product. I rarely get clear images on the destination. And I think that's intentional, right? I don't think the universe wants me getting attached to the final form. But what I get is this is what's to do next. And when I ignore that, it keeps coming up as a reoccurring thought for me. So when I get when I let it go and it keeps coming back, usually that tells me go do it.
Yeah.
And then I'll have these points of clarity and I'm like, I got it. I'm going to do it. That's mine to do. Right. And then 2 days later, I can be like, wait, where am I going? What am I doing? And I am starting to realize like those points where I'm in this lack of clarity are usually intentional pauses. They're usually like, okay, when you lack clarity, like chill the F out. Like just like this is a time for self-care. That's
a good reminder to have. I feel like I don't have that ability to know when to stop. It's just go until I'm like, I'm so tired, I need to lay down. Catch up for a day.
And that is the programming that like
that's definitely how I'm wired.
We should feel guilty or shameful if we aren't doing that. And I forget who said it, but this idea of rest as resistance. So like to rest, to sleep, to nap, to have self-care is a form of resistance against the machine, against the machine that tells you your body is not your own, that tells you that you need to be working 24/7.
Which is a fixed mindset.
Yeah, which is the mindset of the overculture that puts us into these like, workaholic mentalities and slave mentalities. So like, to be very intentional with like not treating our bodies as things we use and push and drive, but like when we nurture our bodies, when we tend to them, when we love them, they open and they flower, and there's more,
there's more to put out there. There's more potential for you to succeed and get things done when you do focus on those times of rest.
Yeah, and even
growth,
even the way we experience life. Like, so I think of it like this, like, we're naturally geared to this range, this spectrum, this range of perceptible vibration that's like 1/1 billionth of what's actually out there, right? So as we become traumatized and our bodies start to shut down, or when we push them so hard and our bodies start to like kind of close, then we're perceiving even less of that range. When we work with self-care, when we oil, when we like, when we tell the body that we're safe, and when we really tend to that body and the body starts to open and flower, we actually open to a broader range of perceived phenomenon, like sensory experience, and literally new worlds open up. What you could perceive before, what you can perceive now, you couldn't perceive before. So you're like, I know Ram Dass talked about after he had a stroke, like worlds opened up for him. Like, I felt bad for the guy who's trying to give a lecture. He can't even understand what he's saying, but he was saying it was like such a gift for him. Yeah. So, I know meditators talk about like when they get past a certain threshold, like literally worlds that weren't there because the attention has become so focused, it dives under the surface, like new colors, new beings, so literally there are worlds to explore beyond the surface of reality, which I think the body is always the primary vehicle for that experience expression.
Yeah, I love that you use the fact that a body is a vehicle. And I think you told me this analogy once. Some people will drive their car without changing the oil, right? And that car's still going to drive, but it's not going to drive well, right? So you got to tend to that car. Get your oil change your tires, brake pads, so that it can run smoothly and more potential, right? Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
And then as far as that, like, we have our cars that we drive, but we don't need to identify them. They are not us. So also, like, if we're going to get into that conversation about the body, I think like just that recognition of the body is a vehicle, but it's also not
as a noun.
Yeah, and not who and what we are, right? Yeah. Like there is a part of us that
the vehicle's a process to getting where we're trying to go.
Yeah, and like this is the body that is Sal, but there is something more eternal that is gonna when this Sal body, this vehicle, right? This 94 Chevy, whatever, right? Like when that goes, right? Like whatever that is beyond that is Sal will continue on into a new domain of consciousness.
It's awesome, man. Did you want to talk about the Two of Pentacles at all, kind of relating to something similar?
Yeah.
So here, I'll show it. You can.
So the Two of Pentacles speaks more to like obligations and like juggling. Like, we got mortgage to pay, we got kids, we got baseball games and football games. Yeah. And so like it's the having enough space to enough bandwidth to balance all that. And, that would get into like sometimes being able to say no, or, like just knowing where your values are and being really discerning about what's healthy, what you want in your life, where to say no. Are these relationships nurturing you? Are they reciprocal? So, and I think I think as Andrew Huberman said, like, it's not just sleep that revitalizes you. You want your experiences in the day to give you energy. So, when I'm mindful at work, or when I work like, 4 to 5, 6 hours, like I feel good. When I work over that 6 hour point, like especially in one straight stretch, I feel my energy start to drain because I've pushed past a limit, right? So when Sal and I do these podcasts, when I'm done with the podcast, we speak about our energy levels when we're done. Sometimes we've just worked a 6-7 hour shift, then we go do a podcast, and I actually feel more energy than before I started. So noticing how your energy shifts before and after activities. And when you feel more energy, that's something that's nourishing. When you feel like it's a drain, that's something that's literally draining. And are there ways to stay more level while you're doing things that could be draining? So I know if I get too energetic and too excited when I teach, it starts to drain me. Where if I stay heart-centered, if I'm aware of my breath, if I stay in touch with what my body is experiencing on a moment-to-moment way, then I usually end up more nourished than drained. So it's not always the experience, but it's how you're processed through the experience. Where's your attention going? Is it too much out? Are you staying in tune with your body through the experience? So, these are just tips and tools for energy maintenance, which is a lot of that balance that we're talking about.
And I like how you use the analogy, like juggling things, knowing like
Yeah.
what's the right time to catch certain things. So like, I think for me, I tend to juggle more things than I have hands for, right? So
you juggle with your feet.
Yeah. And then everything drops on the floor. That's the best way I can put it. So I think it's really important to be more aware and more mindful of that balance or the imbalance I have in my life, and try and like say no to more things. Saying no is a really difficult thing. So if I can do that.
Yeah, and that gets into people pleasing.
Yeah.
To like all that good stuff.
And like confidence in yourself and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got a baby.
Yeah. Got a lot going on,
So,
to say the least.
So the available time, personal time, is going to shift dramatically.
Yeah, so I might be down here, but when you got that natal chart reading for me, what Largen said was, come fall, I'm going to have this great spike in energy. And this was before he even knew I was having it. I told him right after I was having a baby. So I guess, I'm on my come down of rest, and once this baby comes, I can kick it in high gear again. I'll have this energy. And whenever it feels right, it's not like it's a linear answer. It's not set in stone.
Yeah.
When I get there, when I'm in tune with my body, if I can keep pushing.
Yeah, maybe it's not a push. Maybe it's just the energy of the baby and the excitement and the joy, right? Like maybe just the presence of that baby in your life, right, is inspired.
Is the high.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings balance to you, right?
Yeah.
Like I think when I had my second child, my daughter, like I think in some ways she balanced the family a little bit. Like she's a Libran, she's pretty high energy, but like my son is like kind of the prince, and he's like, so that energy of like, if he was an only child, it would have been like way out of,
because that's how I was.
Me. And so like, she kind of puts him in his, like, she's tough. So she like pushes him around a little bit, even though he's older than her. So like sometimes just these beings, right? And sometimes those beings are the sun, the moon, right? Sometimes those beings are cosmic.
Change of seasons.
Right? Yeah. So we have all these seemingly external, right? Not really external, but environmental factors that, are shifting that sense of balance for us as well.
I guess you could say that's why a lot of people tend to have like a seasonal depression, like in the winter. That could really throw them off that balance. That kind of.
Yeah. And I also think that's a lack of our ability to turn inward. So we're looking to continue to do, and
you don't want to be stuck inside with yourself all season,
Yeah, well,
some people,
we're trying to do an adventure and get shit done all the time. That's not what winter was meant for. That's not so winter is that like contemplative turning inward. It's the feedback, right? So if we're unwilling or we don't know how to really engage with that, we're like, where'd the energy go that I had in the spring and the summer, right? Like look at the plants, right? The energy that is outpouring for flowering goes inward to revitalize the roots for next year.
Yeah.
So since our culture doesn't teach that, right? Since we don't have that yin, we're like all yang, which is masculine, no feminine. We're like, what happened, right? Well, like, where's my energy to go do? And it's like, hey, this is not really, that's not the time for it.
It's a really good point, man. So like not being aware of that time of rest, like snuck up on them. And now they're at a loss for words, right? They're at a loss.
Yeah. And then they were like, oh, it's seasonal depression. It's like, no, you just got to get in touch with the yin energy.
Okay. I like the analogy you use with plants, how they focus on growing their roots in the off season. That's really good. That's good imagery. Anything else you want to touch on? I texted you a couple things. I'm gonna check it real quick. Oh, are there any specific practices you use for finding balance, like meditations or,
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary practice, which usually precedes any other practice, is becoming aware of space. So, and space is multifaceted in the sense that like there's this very literal space of this room. There's, space is the distance between us, right? But there's also like space in your calendar. Like, do you have something every day? But like, there's this energetic space that's always there. So when I start to do contemplative work or somatic meditation or anything like that, you tune into space first, which basically means you tune into the space that kind of underlies everything. So I guess the best way I could put it is, if you're writing on a piece of paper, right? The paper, once you write something, the paper didn't go away. Like, even though you can't see the paper, it's just under the ink, right? So in the same way, there's space underneath all of this form that we see, even the matter. So if you're in your backyard and you dig out some of the earth, and now there's a hole, which is what we would say empty space. Was that space not there before you started digging?
Yeah.
Right. That space was still there. You just didn't notice it because there was this earth overlaying it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this way that space underlies that's always already there. So and the same thing goes with silence and sound. So there's a way to start to tune in, and I think it's a depth. It's like, I think of it in terms of music and octaves. Like when you get done, like your range, your notes, like you can go up and down an octave, right? And be the same notes, but they're like no longer on the same plane.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's a way that space works on a deeper dimension that underlays everything else. So these are the places where we find deep quiet. These are the places where we find stillness. So like maybe there can be chaos going on in your world of form, but if you can tune into what's underneath that, you still have a sense of the stillness and the quiet. So in terms of being able to find balance, for me, being able, like, sometimes I'll get crazy, but like I know I can access that again. So it was interesting when I moved 2 years ago. Like there was a maybe 2-week period where we moved everything in. It wasn't shuffled around yet, and there were just boxes everywhere. And in my old house, I had a room dedicated to my meditation space and yoga space called like a yoga room. And I have the same thing here, but all the boxes were in that room, and I didn't have a dedicated space to sit, to be still, to do yoga, to meditate. And I could feel myself in I could feel myself in these old patterns of how I used to be in my early 20s, where I would just go until I was exhausted, and then I would smoke a bowl, drink a half bottle of wine, go to sleep, and do it again, or something like that. And it was just constant excess.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when I was moving for those couple weeks, because I went back into that pattern, but I wasn't freaked out because I just knew it was only going to be a little bit of time until I got my space back, until I got my kind of sanctuary space back.
That makes sense.
So, and back to that point, like having a place especially in your house or somewhere that's yours, that is your safe space. I don't care if it's a closet. I don't care, seriously, like if you're sharing a place with, like, it doesn't have to be grandiose, but you need some place that you can call your own, that you can shut a door to, that you can be like, no one's going to bother me here. Like I can have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to just settle my nervous system, to chill, to breathe, to do whatever. But like to have somewhere that is, and I would, not the car. Don't make it the car.
Where's my car?
Don't make it the car. It's too busy.
It's very busy. You're right.
Cars are meant to move. You want
That's a really good point.
you don't want,
Not a very relaxing place.
you don't want your chill space to be like
Have wheels.
to have wheels. Yeah. So yeah, my two things for balance would be, what's your relationship to space, both in a literal way and kind of in a more physical, metaphysical way, and then what do you have a safe space in your life that that you've cultivated? And when you keep coming back to that same space every day, it starts to work for you, in the sense that, like, as soon as I go onto my yoga mat, like my body immediately starts to relax, because that's what it's done every day for the last 10 years. Where like if I try to do the same practice in bed, I usually fall asleep because that's what I do when I go to bed. So our body gets used to these rhythms and these intentionalities behind spaces. So the bed's for sleeping, the yoga mat's for asana or, meditation or contemplation or connecting or, whatever. It's for intentional work. So having and if your space is going to be mobile, then let it be your yoga mat that you bring with you. Right?
Okay.
So like if Sal's like, hey, I don't have that space, but I'll bring my yoga mat with me and I plop it here and I plop it there. And now all of a sudden his space is this mat that goes with him.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Gotta find space in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Find a closet, maybe. Find a closet.
There's one on my deck. I'll use that.
Or you can get to work half hour early every day and bring your yoga mat and make that a practice.
Yeah.
And some people talk about sit spots. I know my wife did, Seeing Through Native Eyes, which is like John Young's more nature work. And his big thing was a sit spot where you go to the same spot in nature every day and you notice different rhythms and patterns and sun rising and moon and the animals that you hear. So like, but again, this intentionality behind the ritualness of like returning to the same place.
I'm gonna have to give that a try. I like that. Cool. All right. Do you want to call it for today? Getting a little close.
Yeah, man.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you for helping me find balance and getting me to do this again. It's been a couple days. So
yeah, dude.
Appreciate it.
You'll leave, you'll come back, you'll leave, and that pause will just upgrade your return.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, man.
Till next time, guys. Take care.